Hello again, I'm Doug Smith, and welcome to the 13 November 2015 edition of Portsmouth This Week, the voice of Portsmouth Town Hall. Our guest today is Tom Ardito, the recently appointed Executive Director of the Aquidneck Island Planning Commission. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Doug. I'm glad to be here.
I wonder if we could start. I'd like to talk a little bit about your background and some of the projects you have going on. But
Sure.
Before we get to that, could we talk a little bit about AIPC and, in general, what it does?
Absolutely. The Aquidneck Island Planning Commission was created in 1985. It was created by both the state legislature as well as the three towns of Aquidneck Island, the three communities of Aquidneck Island: Portsmouth, Middletown, and Newport, obviously. And its purpose is to help the towns in coordinating and working together on issues of mutual concern related to Aquidneck Island. We're lucky on Aquidneck Island because we have three great municipalities. They're all really well run. They're all unique in their own way. Newport is, more urban than the other communities. Obviously, it has a much bigger tourist business. Middletown is more suburban, but also has, really important tourist industry elements. And Portsmouth is the most rural of the three. And less focused on tourism, more on the marine trades, as you know. So each town is great at managing its own, all aspects of municipal services and so forth, everything from roads to parks to, public services, police, fire, all that stuff. But while the towns share Aquidneck Island, their job is not so much to work with the other towns. So we were created to help the towns work with each other and work with the Navy, because the Navy is, as you know, both a big property owner and
almost like a third community. It is a fourth
for all
community,
intents and purposes. Yeah, it's like a fourth municipality. Sure. Only it's like a municipality that's run out of Washington instead of run out of the town hall on Aquidneck Island, which can make them a little challenging to work with, obviously. So there are obviously issues of mutual concern that are really island-wide issues, and those include things like transportation, open space, water quality, storm preparedness, even just communications and connectedness and public information. So those are the kinds of things we work on. But everything we work on, we try to do in partnership with the municipalities.
Well, I'll tell you, as you know, people in New England are kind of they like doing things their own way,
to say the least.
And I wish you the best of luck of getting these three communities to come together. I guess one of my questions would be, is this the only one of these commissions in the state? Are we unique in that sense?
There are two in the state, and we're quite different. There's the Washington County Regional Planning Council. The Washington County Regional Planning Council is a lot different because I'm not quite sure how many towns are part of it, but it's probably about, I would say, 9 or 10 towns. There's direct representation from the town councils on the board of the Washington County Planning Commission, and the issues obviously are different because it's not an island. They're not dealing with the kind of intensive coastal issues that we are. In our case, it's a lot closer because there's only three communities. Everybody pretty much knows everybody else in municipal government, and so obviously it's a much more kind of contained kind of thing. In Massachusetts, there are regional planning organizations throughout the states that are established and funded by the state. Here, although we were established in part by state legislation, there's no state funding, and there's no sort of state mandate to have a regional planning commission. So, for example, in the northern part of the state, there are no regional planning commissions.
In Massachusetts, they also have counties, so they have some sort of county government as well.
Yeah.
Which I guess does some of the kind of planning.
I'm not quite so sure that the counties do planning. I mean, they do land registry, registries of deeds and that sort of thing. But planning in Massachusetts is, like Rhode Island, it's done on the local and the state level. But then there are also these regional planning organizations.
Yeah.
And of course, being a small state, there's a bigger role for the state planning department here than there would be in a bigger state.
Yeah, I should remind you that the people that founded Newport were actually here and founded Portsmouth first, and then they got fed up and went south
Yes.
to found Newport. So that's the
Yes.
kind of mentality.
We have a long tradition in.
That's right, of doing things our own way.
Yep.
Now, how are you organized? Who are members and who are supporters?
Sure. So our office is in Newport on Broadway, 437 Broadway in Newport, and folks are welcome to stop by during business hours, say hello. We have a board that consists of four people from each of the 3 island municipalities. Right now we have a full board, so we have 12 people on the board. Our staff is small. There's just a couple of us right now. We also have council representatives. So in the case of Portsmouth, it's Keith Hamilton, who's also the council president, but he's also the council representative to AIPC. So we communicate directly with him, and then he, will often disseminate information to the rest of the council. We work very closely with the town planners as well. I know that you here in Portsmouth, that's Gary Crosby.
Yeah.
We try to maintain open communications with the town managers, but the planners and the town managers have no formal connection to AIPC. That said, one of my goals over the kind of next year or so is to create an advisory board for AIPC. So we have informal relationships with all these folks now, but to just formalize that just a little bit, and so that I would envision the town planners, the planning board chairs, and other nonprofits and so forth that we work with as partners as all being part of that advisory board.
Yeah, I think Gary Crosby does a lot of things here, and one of the things he does, of course, is the comp plan.
Right.
And I would think that the comp plan has to play pretty heavily in the kinds of things you do with each community.
Yes, absolutely. And so both Portsmouth and Newport are in the process of writing new comp plans. I think every 10 years, I think they have to write a new comp plan. And the state, adds requirements. A lot of those are good. For example, there's now a storm preparedness requirement that there didn't used to be, right? Or emergency.
To have that in your comp plan.
Yes, exactly. But over time, the state has provided less resources to the communities to help them with the comp plans, at the same time increasing, like so many other things, increasing the requirements that the communities have to comply with. And for a small community like Portsmouth, that's a challenge. It's just a resource challenge. So one of our goals is to help the communities in developing those sections of the comp plans, and to the extent that it makes sense to do so, to kind of harmonize the comp plans with each other. As you said, we have a traditional home rule in New England. Everybody likes to, do things their own way. And it's true that the 3 communities on Aquidneck Island are all different, in their land use and their culture and so forth. But they also share a lot. And when you talk about, again, things like transportation, water quality, a lot of the issues are shared as well.
Okay, let me get back to this advisory board you're talking about. That would include the planners from the different communities, and would they attend the regular meetings? I guess I'm trying to see what the who does what. That we have 4 reps from the town.
Yep.
We have our council liaison, and council, I guess he's a member of the AIPC, Keith Hamilton.
He's a non-voting liaison. He's like an ex officio member of the board, essentially.
And then we'd have our planner, who's, assuming you can get this advisory board up to speed, our planner would be on that. Would they all attend these meetings, and how would that work?
I realize that.
How often do you meet, by the way?
Well, the board meets monthly right now. The organization has been going through a big transition. The board was reorganized and expanded. We began developing a strategic plan that I'm finishing up right now. They hired me. So, during this transition period, the board has been meeting monthly. As we get things on, cruise control, if you will, and get things up and running the way I and the board would like to see them, we may not need to meet quite so often, and we'll figure that out. In terms of the advisory board, I definitely, I'm as aware as anybody else of the fact that everybody is overburdened with meetings, and so the goal would not be to, ask everybody to every meeting that we have, although people are certainly invited. Our meetings are open to everybody, and people are, anybody's welcome to come to one of our meetings, certainly. And they're posted, by the way, on the Secretary of State's website under the open meetings law requirements.
And where do you usually hold the meetings?
We either hold them usually at our offices on 437 Broadway or sometimes at the Newport County Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
But just to finish your question about the advisory board, I would see the advisory board maybe only coming together once a year at an annual meeting or something like that. And then, just reaching out to people as needed when we need specific information or help on a certain issue, that sort of thing.
Well, I know your own background is in environmental management.
Yes.
And I just wonder, how do you feel that your education and experience in that area would be useful in this position?
Yeah, well, certainly for Aquidneck Island, water quality is a huge issue, and I've done a lot of work on that. Here on Aquidneck Island, our water resources are more integrated than almost certainly any place else in Rhode Island. So in other words, surface water runoff actually goes into the drinking water reservoirs. The drinking water supply also goes into coastal waters. Coastal waters obviously are much more important here than they are in some other places like Providence. I mean, coastal water quality. If you live in Providence, you live in the city, you get your drinking water from the Situate Reservoir, which is 20, 30 miles away in a relatively pristine watershed, and you drive down to Narragansett to go swimming, right, or to Newport or,
not
or
in
Middletown.
Providence,
right.
for sure.
But here in, Middletown would be a good example, or Portsmouth, a place like Island Park, you have runoff going straight into the coastal waters that people swim in. That's why we have beach closures a lot of times. And the drinking water supply, the reservoirs in Newport and Middletown, and also a little bit in Tiverton, I think, are used by many Portsmouth people as drinking water. And surface water runoff goes straight into those reservoirs,
right,
which are classed as impaired, which means that DEM considers the water quality to be degraded in them.
Gigantic, expensive plant up there to deal with the water quality.
Yeah, right.
Right there at our own area reservoir there.
Right, but it's necessary and often cheaper to deal with the runoff before you treat it in a plant. And if you look at the city of New York, about 10 or 15 years ago, targeted land acquisition in upstate New York, and I think primarily upstate New York, where their drinking water supply comes from. And because they realized that it was cheaper to preserve land in the watersheds of these reservoirs than to treat it at the other end.
Yeah. Well, I can see certainly that water quality would be an issue that, as an environmental manager, you'd be right on top of. What about some of the other projects that the AIPC has taken on? Well, before we get to some of those, I guess, let me ask you what your near-term goals are as the new executive director.
Well, there's just the organizational side of things. Like I said, we've got a new board. We're working on, just improving our governance, making sure that the organization is run in a really excellent way, in a transparent way. Because we're a nonprofit, but we're also being chartered by the towns, and the state means that we're a public body as well. In addition to water quality, we're very interested in transportation. AIPC has always been involved in that and did an island-wide transportation plan a few years ago. A lot of the elements of that have been implemented or are being implemented by DOT and the towns, but there's a lot that still needs to be done. We're really interested in bicycle and pedestrian safety and access on the roads. Anybody who's driven down East and West Main Road knows that they're the farthest thing from safe in most places.
They're much better than they were, though.
Yeah, and some of that is due to some of the recommendations of our transportation study that my predecessor Tina.
Tina was one of our favorite people on the program. She was always very upbeat.
Tina's great. I still work with her. She's at she's running the Newport Tree Society now.
Oh, she's still here on the island.
Yeah,
Okay,
she's semi-retired, so she does that part time, and she's doing the Newport Open Space Plan is a project that she's working on now that I've been participating
Okay,
in.
please give her my regards.
I will, by all means. Yeah.
Fun lady. Okay, so near term, get organized, continue with some of the projects you've got going. I know the AIPC put together this West Side Master Plan
Yes.
as an example.
Yes.
And the thing is, where is that going exactly?
Well, where that's going is that was done with the 3 municipalities and the Navy, obviously. And as part of that process, each of the municipalities targeted lands that they were interested in acquiring from the Navy. In the case of Newport, it was primarily the Naval Hospital area, which is now all closed, you know. In the case of Middletown, there's 2 parcels. One is, I think they call Green End Pier on Burma Road, which is targeted for a public park. There's also a little parcel on the corner of Coddington Highway and West Main. That it's the old Navy Lodge property that the town wants to acquire. And then in the case of Portsmouth, it's 2 of the 4 tank farms. I think there's 4 altogether, 4 or 5. Anyway, 2 tank farms.
So are those all going forward
They
now?
are, yeah. I was at a meeting last week. I mean, it's typical, you know, the Navy takes forever to do this stuff, obviously, and they're working on their environmental impact statement for the transfer of lands. Then there'll be a real estate phase. And then in the case of Portsmouth, there's also going to be a cleanup phase because the tank farms are contaminated from the old diesel fuel, or bunker fuel, I mean. So that part of the process is moving forward, and I think the West Side Plan was really helpful in teeing that up. I think from our perspective, there's not so much a need for any more grand West Side planning because the towns are on track to acquire the lands they want. I think there's still a need to look at Burma Road and the rail corridor on the west side, and you know, what's the best reuse for those? You know, should the state acquire Burma Road? Should it remain with the Navy? What kind of improvements can be made? Again, if you talk about bike and pedestrian, as well as coastal access, you know, both the rail line and Burma Road are really important.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people would like to see something done perhaps with the rail over time. You know, even going off the island or being used like as a transportation mode.
Yes, and of course the Sakonnet River Bridge now has the new one has dedicated bikeways, which is really cool. But they don't really tie into the island.
There's no real connection.
Yeah, right. It goes down to like Anthony Road, that area.
And then it stops and you're on the road again.
Right, right. Yeah. So tying in that north end of the island is a challenge, but it's something that we would like to do.
You know, one of the projects that has been ongoing for some time is this broadband initiative for the island. Are you all involved in that as well?
We are, and we are working with the 3 communities to identify what we can do to help with that. I mean, I think it's widely agreed that broadband service on the island is less than it could be, and there's a need to improve it. That said, exactly how to go about doing that, you know, to be honest, we're still working on. One possibility would be some sort of a community broadband approach, which has been used in some other communities around the country, which is essentially where the municipalities would come together to enable a new broadband system in place. And there's different ways that could work. It might work with private capital. It might work with primarily public money. And we're just, to be honest, we're in the early stages of really looking at the alternatives, and we will work with the municipalities to see what everybody thinks is
so
best.
Would this be something like then people would pay the community or whoever's running this operation for Wi-Fi or internet access rather than their normal?
It could be, yeah. I mean, like in Taunton, in a lot of places it's piggybacked on an existing utility. So like in Taunton, they have a city, I think it's a city electric utility, I forget what it is, but they piggybacked internet on that. And, you know, we talk about open access versus closed network. So like the existing network that we have, Cox, it's a closed network because you can buy your internet through Cox, but you can only buy your services through Cox. If you have an open network, then essentially any service provider can work over that network. So it gives, potentially could give the consumer more options, particularly as we're going to a system where a lot of people will, in the future, probably not be necessarily subscribing to cable, but just getting all their television and everything over the internet.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways now. I understand that. How is AIPC funded?
AIPC receives an annual appropriation from each of the 3 towns on Aquidneck Island. It's $18,000 per community. It's not enough to run the organization,
Right.
but it's a really important source of revenue for us. It's kind of our foundation or base revenue. And one of my main goals at AIPC is to make sure that the towns get more than their money's worth for that $18,000 every year. In addition, we receive, we write project-specific grants. In the past, a lot of the funding for AIPC was large planning grants. So the Aquidneck Island Transportation Study, for example, was a $500,000 grant. It was actually federal money, but it was through the state Division of Planning. Those kinds of grants are largely gone now, those big planning grants. So in the future, they likely won't be a big part of our funding. And so we're looking instead to foundation dollars and project grants, both government and private. And another, that's part of what we're working on now is how to best fund the priorities that the communities have identified for Aquidneck Island.
I would assume then that you have a good relationship with our local state legislators and even our federal representatives.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And in fact, I should mention that we're planning a forum of Aquidneck Island legislators for January at Salve Regina at the Pell Center.
Okay, great.
And so, keep an eye on our website, and we're just in the process of firming up a date for that right now, but we'd like to bring together all the Aquidneck Island legislators to talk about, issues of island-wide importance.
That'd be great. I look forward to seeing that, and let us know. We can try to mention it on the program too. try to get
Absolutely,
other
yeah.
People to go. One of the things in one of the recent articles I read, you said that AIPC is an agency that is non-profit but also quasi-public.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
We're not really unique in that way. There are a few other organizations like that. What I mean is that we're technically a nonprofit organization. We're an IRS 501c3 not-for-profit corporation, which means we're subject to all the auditing requirements and all the tax requirements that go along with that, as well as the tax advantages, right? But we're quasi-public in the sense that we were set up by the state and the municipalities. So we're subject, for example, to the state open meetings law, which a regular nonprofit, the Aquidneck Land Trust, is not subject to state open meetings requirements because they're just a private nonprofit, essentially, where we have we are by nature a public body and subject to open meeting law requirements.
Okay, we only got a few minutes left, believe
Okay.
it or not. And I know one of your big initiatives now is Solarize Aquidneck.
Yep.
Can you talk about that and the meeting you had last night? For
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. We had a big kickoff meeting at CCRI last night of Solarize Aquidneck. This is a program that AIPC developed with the 3 municipalities. It's a program that's sponsored by the state. There's a couple of, primarily the State Office of Energy Resources. And it's designed to encourage homeowners primarily to install solar photovoltaic on their roofs. And the way it works is it provides really great combination of financial incentives. And first of all, it creates a group buying system, kind of like a buying cooperative. Because it's over a short period of time and because we had solar installers bid, it creates a tiered pricing model. So the more people sign up, the cheaper the cost is.
Bigger the number is, the more the savings.
Yeah, because the installers save money on purchasing the equipment, and it's cheaper for them to mobilize their crews and so forth. It's what they call a turnkey operation, which means that if you sign up, the installers handle all the permitting, building permits, historic district, if you're in a historic district, that kind of stuff, so you don't have to deal with any of that. They connect you to the grid, national grid. There's warranties with all the systems, and we selected 3 installers, and we identified one for each community that we thought was the best fit with that community. People can choose from any of the installers on the island, but we ask that they first talk to the installer that we've chosen for their community. They can just go online to solarizeri.com/Aquidneck, and they can sign up there, and they'll get a call from an installer, or they can call our office, and we'll give them a number that they can call an installer directly.
Now, as I understand it, people get something like one of their roofs or something, solar panels installed, and they can take advantage of these special rates that you're talking about with both the installer, plus you're getting a lot of state and federal.
Right, I should have mentioned that.
grants.
So there's the group buying discount, plus there's a federal tax credit, and then there's a state grant. And those 3 things are combined, basically. So the cost of installation for a homeowner under this program is roughly half the cost of if you just went out and talked to an installer and put the panels on your roof. It's a time-limited program. It's only going through February 15th. And the reason for that is that some of the tax credits are going to be expiring. And also because by limiting the time period, we were able to get better prices for the installations because the installers can, get all their installs in over a short period of time. So, in order to participate in the program, you would need to sign up by February 15th, but the installation can take place anytime over the next year.
Okay, so I guess the main thing would be to have people go on the website or give you all a call.
Yep,
for
either way.
specific details.
Yep.
It sounds like a great idea. And as I mentioned, Tina Dolan was one of our favorite guests on the program. I hope you'll, in the future, as we get into more of these projects, you'll come back to the show and talk to us about them.
I would be delighted to. This is really fun.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. One word for our viewing audience I have to mention is you need to mark the date of Wednesday to December. That's when our Town Portsmouth is going to be aired on our local PBS station, WSBE Cox Channel 8. Our Town Portsmouth will air at 8 p.m. And the video clips and photos in this program that you'll see on the video were all provided by Portsmouth residents, your friends and neighbors, to tell Portsmouth stories and to introduce Portsmouth to the greater Rhode Island community. It should be a very interesting show, and I hope everybody will take a look at this. It'll probably air a couple more times after that, but you might want to really look at the first time. There'll be some preliminary discussions and things about what this is all about. But that's one of the great things about being on an island and having this tight-knit community, that we can get programs like that and try to explain what is Portsmouth all about.
Yeah.
And this program is a great opportunity to do that. Thanks again, Tom.
My pleasure, Doug.
And we'll see you all next week on Portsmouth This Week. Thank you.